All right. Welcome to the second episode, second podcast, part of the Hardware Highlights series. Um, if you haven't seen our first episode, it's about the NVIDIA 3000 series graphics cards. I'd recommend going and take a look at that and listening into that before moving into this, because this will kind of piggyback off of that, and we'll do a lot of comparisons in this episode compared to the NVIDIA cards. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the AMD 6000 series cards. They were very recently announced, and they're definitely causing a bit of a storm in the industry, especially considering what they're promising for performance. So let's kind of jump straight into that. They're talking about a 200% increase in performance from the previous 5000 series generation cards, a 50% better performance per watt, and they're using that same 7 nanometer chip size, which is really interesting because their previous generation GPUs they couldn't even match in NVIDIA, not even close. The 2080 Ti would beat out any sort of card that they had, and now they're working off of that same size chip, and they're bringing incredible performance to the table. They're talking about performance that is greater than all of the NVIDIA cards. They're boasting benchmarks that are better than all of the NVIDIA cards. So let's kind of talk about your guys' thoughts on do you guys think we haven't had we haven't got these cards in the hands in the reviewers yet. We're just working off of AMD's numbers. Do you guys actually think once these cards hit the market and people get their hands on them, do you actually think they're going to be outperforming the NVIDIA cards?
Do I think that they'll be outperforming the NVIDIA cards when they hit the market? Uh, I would say absolutely. I mean, I took the liberty of running a benchmark before we started, just because I wanted to see how they matched up exactly. And let me tell you, it's just crazy. I mean, you're getting higher FPS at pretty much 1080p, 1440p. The only thing they're the same in is 1440p ultra wide. Um, you get the 6 gigs more of memory when you compare, let's say, the 6800 versus the 3080. I mean, that is just like that's huge. You know,
Right. Yeah, we're talking about a huge increase in memory, and although it's technically, I think it's a half generation behind. GDDR6 X versus
yeah,
6. I think it's technically a half generation behind, but we're talking about they've basically doubled the memory, especially when it comes to the 6800 and the 3070. Those are supposed to be equivalent cards, quote unquote. The 6800 is a little bit more expensive, but it's twice the amount of VRAM that we're working off of before. So they're definitely very interesting cards, um, and I think they're really like presenting some crazy statistics that are really shocking the industry. So they've gotten solutions to ray tracing. They're taking ray tracing and taking it head on. They're trying to replicate NVIDIA's DLSS, to try to bring some competition there. Offer those same features, which is really interesting. Kind of some main points to talk about with this is, while they're showing better clock speeds and better performance, less power consumption, stuff like that. We have interesting features such as infinity cache, which AMD is claiming it's 128 megs of super fast cache that should help improve memory bottlenecks, and that is just so fast that you really don't run out of that 128 megs. It dumps and receives data faster than you can really even comprehend, which is super interesting. I'm not sure how much will notice that as consumers playing games. But I think it's an interesting point. I think it's a one of those flashy selling points. Something I really wanted to talk about and hear everybody's thoughts on, was the integration of using AMD's 5000 series CPUs and a 6000 series graphics card. As of right now, the 5000 series CPUs, they were announced not too long ago, and they are also boasting some incredibly, impressive stats that we'll have to talk about when we get into the CPU segment of these podcasts. So not to go too deep into that, but they're talking about if you pair a 5000 series CPU from AMD with a 6000 series GPU, you can see a 6 to 10% increase in performance, due to how they communicate with each other and how they share data. And that I thought that was really interesting. You know, do you really think, Drew, I'll go to you. Do you really think that's going to influence consumers to, hey, let's purchase, a 5000 series CPU because I want to get that 6 to 10, percent increase in performance? Do you think that's really going to, motivate people?
I 100% do. I think that's not just like a great benefit to people who much prefer AMD as a company. I feel like it's just a great selling strategy. I mean, if you want to sell more CPUs, you want to sell more GPUs, you know, why not just package them both together and then give the consumers, benefit for purchasing both? I'm not sure if they've already announced something like this, but they'll probably do bundles at some point.
Right.
You could buy both at the same time. Maybe they'll even give you a better price. And these are already, I mean, in my opinion, very well priced parts. AMD's always been seen as kind of like the budget option, but
Right.
like they have always performed very well on their own. Uh, you know, I mean, it definitely makes you enjoy what they're doing as a company a lot more when you see things like this, that they're giving more benefits to consumers who are loyal uh, over the many parts that they sell. And I think we'll probably end up seeing a lot of builds that revolve around the CPUs and the GPUs combined going forward, especially.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's great. I love the idea you kind of mentioned with the bundles, because you see that a lot now already. Even just if it's just Amazon saying you should buy these two parts together. You're buying the CPU, maybe you should buy this motherboard too. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that because you don't see usually, hey, you're buying the CPU, you should probably buy this GPU too, or vice versa. You see it, CPU, motherboard, kind of style. So I think that's a great point. I think we're going to see a lot more of those bundles coming together, with new performance coming in, and I think that's interesting. One of those points I kind of wanted to talk about was, AMD's reliability in the past. This is my biggest concern, especially when it comes to the new cards, is AMD hasn't had a fantastic track record when it comes to good graphics drivers. When it comes to good thermals. I have an RX 580 in one of my other PCs, and the thermals aren't the best. And I know Nate, you had I think a 5700 XT or something along those lines, and you didn't have the best of thermals, from when I had talked to you either. And I think Nate, this question will be probably best suited towards you. Um, you know, what do you think? Do you think we're going to get those same thermals? Do you think they're going to try to improve that? Do you think we're going to be able to compete with the other cards? Because I have a 1070 Ti as of right now, and that thing never gets above 65 degrees Celsius ever. So, what are your thoughts on it?
I originally had an RX 580 in my PC as well, and trying to run a game like Overwatch at high frame rates, like I had that thing on low settings, and I was barely cracking 140 FPS
Hmm.
because I was trying to hit that 144 hertz because it gives you literally a statistical advantage. But when I upgraded to the 5700 XT at 1080p, it was a lot better because it's obviously a much better card. But yes, the thermals were still le- less than ideal. Like it would still make my room quite hot. And now from a 5700 XT to a 2080 Super, running the same game at 240 hertz was infinitely better. My room is now not hot, very hot anymore. My GPU stays at about 60 degrees Celsius, and it's just a much better experience. But it's just it's a little hard to compare them because the 5700 XT is just so far below anything NVIDIA was putting out in the last generation.
Right.
And now this generation, they're actually making something to try and compete with them. Which the last gen, they really weren't even attempting to.
Right. And, I think that kind of works into, what are the longevity, what's the longevity of those cards? We all know statistically, the hotter you run your components, they're going to last not as long. And I don't know if, Drew, I know you're running AMD cards too. I don't know if your thermals get too bad. I know you're running, 2 cards, so, I know that kind of balances the load a little bit, but I don't know if you notice any, thermal problems you have with your PC, anything like that?
Well, definitely, if I'm loading up something that's very graphically intensive, my room will get very hot. Like, not, it's not always noticeable, but, I think definitely it would make someone like me really ponder switching to just a single card setup, just, for the simple fact that my room won't be as hot all the time.
Right.
But, um, obviously, I've been on the great end for longevity of components. I mean, 4 years, really not bad. I mean, honestly, they'll probably hold up even longer if I wanted them to. But, I think definitely with these newer cards coming out, I really got to take a look and see, switching to just one card that could do the same as my 2 cards right now.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I think that those are interesting points. Obviously, we don't have these cards in the hands of the consumers yet. We don't know how they're performing in consumer systems. We haven't seen thermals. We haven't seen benchmarks in traditional setup. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll kind of stay tuned to see what that looks like over time and how that performs. And I think a lot of people right now who haven't gotten the chance to buy a 3000 series card from NVIDIA, they're now hesitating. Even if these cards come back in stock, I think a lot of people are going to wait because they're going to want to see the performance difference between the 6000 series cards from AMD versus the 3000 series cards from NVIDIA. So I think it's definitely interesting. So I think that about wraps it up. I think those are kind of the topics we wanted to talk about. Anybody who tuned in, thanks for listening. If you guys have any comments, conversation topics, anything like that, feel free to leave it in our Twitter or Instagram, which is just at hardware highlight. And we can kind of, work from there. So thanks guys. That about wraps it up for this one. We'll see you in the next one.